since I was asking my NCOs who were on airborne status to go to jump master school, I decided I needed to do it. So I was the first female officer in my engineer group to go. To be honest, the proudest moment in my life, I believe, is graduating jump master school on the first try, even more so than getting through West Point.
Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is Kris Urbauer, Cullum number 43774. We'll hear about Kris earning her Master Blaster wings all the way through to her dream job running veterans programs for GE. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any organization, most particularly the GE Transportation Division. Kris Urbauer, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. You are in Chicago right now, or in the Chicagoland area, correct?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you came from Chicago.
Right.
So the cycle is complete.
I'm back home, yes.
Was it work or just a desire to get back to your native land?
Oh gosh, the funny thing is I can't wait to leave. So we'll start there. I'm kind of teasing. My mom was ill. I was living in Louisville, Kentucky at the time, actually, and my mom had breast cancer, and I wasn't that far in Louisville, but I wanted to get back home. And my mentor and boss at the time was very instrumental in helping me get back up here, and then I haven't left since. So.
How does it look from when you grew up to now? What are your perspectives on it? We all have our perspectives on our hometowns, but you got a big city there.
Oh gosh, yeah. So interestingly enough, I don't know how much of the background shows, but I am sitting in the basement of the house I grew up in. I actually live now in the house I grew up in with my mom. Well, my mom is 96, and I live with her in the house I grew up in. We take care of each other, I guess you'd say. So it's talk about complete full circle. So I'm back here.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and going on, we're going to bounce around, I know, but I substitute teach sometimes at
yes, you do.
grammar school. I started in kindergarten, which is about, I don't know which way I'm pointing, about 2 blocks behind me. So yeah, you talk about coming back home. I'm all the way back. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, so you're substitute teaching in the grade school you went to.
Correct.
That's fantastic.
One of the schools I've
I'm living in a place for where my wife's mother is for this similar reason. So I think we're all in that stage of life. So what a great way to handle it though, by going back there. What's it like to substitute teach after all the experiences you've had?
Oh gosh, it's funny. So my sister and brother-in-law are both like teachers, retired teachers. That was their profession, and never in a million years did I think I would be a teacher. I don't have children, and I don't really know much about children. So even more so, why the heck am I teaching? It's fascinating to me. It gives me an opportunity to really see the future generations and, how they're being taught and being raised, and and an opportunity to give back. But it truly is. It's interesting. They don't pay well, so it's all good. I teach when I want, where I want. So I choose the school. I choose the topic, obviously depending on what's needed. And it's just a fascinating kind of study in what's going on in the little tiny generations that will be growing up and becoming leaders of our country, I guess.
And what grades do you find yourself covering now?
Second grade was my favorite. 30 little 7-year-olds and they all want to help, and they all want to tell you how to do it. And, they're the cutest little things, and so, but 30 of them was a lot. The first time I did it, I think I wanted to run out of the room screaming twice, because I was just a little overwhelmed with 30 little people. But then the second time I had the same kids, they all obviously remembered me, and it's not that they were bad the first time. They weren't bad at all, but they just, we're new environment and all that sort of thing. New person, right. I'm going to tell her what to do. The second time we did much better. Smaller the better, I guess. And I didn't think it would be that way.
That's interesting. So let's go back to 1978, 81, Chicago. young Kris Urbauer. What caught your eye about West Point?
Oh gosh, it's funny. I honestly didn't really know much about it at all until, as you probably remember, we all got stuff in the mail. You
Yeah,
know,
sure.
literally, just being honest, as I'm sure we all did, just boxes and boxes of mail from any school you could imagine in the country that I'd never heard of. As I was the smart kid. Oh, okay, smart kid in high school.
Sure,
So
sure.
got some stuff from West Point. The other half of that is my daddy was a World War II veteran,
Mhm.
so he always spoke about every child should join the military. Every child should be in the service. And
Yeah.
until his daughter decided she wanted to go to West Point, then he wasn't too happy about that. But his little girl, but between
Yeah.
my father's influence, obviously, and getting stuff in the mail, and I wanted to go as far away as I could, not because I wanted to get away from home, but I just, where can I go to experience something different? Everybody else was going to University of Illinois or Purdue or
Sure.
kind of the local schools here. I applied to those also. Those are my safety schools. But I really wanted to go to West Point once I learned about it. So,
Now, the
yeah.
volume of mail that many of us got was completely proportional to our performance. So I don't remember my mailbox being that full. But so, you were a standout in something? Was it academics or sports, or what was it that got you all that mail?
Definitely academics. I'm sure as if classmates watch this, they will remember well that I was not much of an athlete. So
Okay.
it was really academics. I did play tennis in high school. So I was like number one singles at my high school, but I went to a Chicago public school. So the coach at West Point didn't really know that I wasn't that good because I was at a Chicago public school, so I really wasn't. I not even really wasn't. I was not good enough to play collegiate tennis, but I was on the team just plebe year because that was on my record that I played tennis.
Right. Well,
So
I
I
went to
was.
a high school with 150 kids per grade, and I was on the football team. West Point was none the wiser.
There you go. You played a sport. So I was like, I
There you
played a
go.
sport.
So, were you a National Merit Scholar and all those types of things that were in vogue back then?
Yeah, all that good stuff. Yeah,
Well, good
math
for you.
team, and oh yeah, I was a nerd. I still am a nerd.
Right.
So
And what
it's
science, literature? What was your
well, the
preference?
funny thing is, I loved math. I was the math person. In fact, I had the same math teacher for all 4 years in high school, like for every single type of math.
Okay.
Because I did extra math, and he was like, "Please don't be a math major, Kris. All you're going to do is teach then." So then I was going to be an engineer. So that's what I ended up doing. But I just loved math and science, but mostly the math arena, the language arts stuff or whatever we called it in high school. Didn't really like that.
And so, did you visit West Point prior to going?
Yes, I went to
Okay.
that academic workshop thing. Was that between junior and senior year? I think. I don't remember. Whatever it was,
Having not been
whatever
invited, I don't know.
whatever summer that was. I went to the academic workshop, and once I went to that, that was it. Then I was so sold it wasn't even funny
Is that
because
right?
I
Is that where
didn't
you get to live a
realize
little bit as a cadet and march around a little bit?
exactly. But no one yelled at you, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I was so sold after that week.
Okay. And then, did you got in and did you prepare it all before going back, or did you just kind of hit it cold like some of us?
Prepare. I tried to prepare physically. I didn't think
Okay.
the mentally part, whatever, but tried to start running, which we ran a little bit for tennis, but it wasn't like PE in high school just wasn't that big of a thing, I don't think, back in the day. So anyways, so I didn't run track or anything like that. So I tried to do some running. I remember my PE teacher in high school used to make us all do push-ups because of me, because I was going to West Point. So everybody loved me for that. But tried to prepare. I don't know how you prepare, it was just kind of like
I
whatever.
could see the PE class where they're saying, "Why can't you all be like Urbauer, more push-ups?" And they're looking at you. Where you there you go.
They loved me. Yeah. So anyways, yeah. Yeah.
What was it like being a new cadet at West Point? How shocking was that?
Well, yeah, pretty shocking. I think it was pretty shocking for all of us.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't excel in any of the athletic stuff, but I can memorize things really well. So that wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't challenging because there was a lot of crap we had to learn, but so some of it wasn't so bad because I could do that sort of thing. I struggled with some of the other stuff. Being a female, you just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. So
Yeah.
you needed to, you got more attention in was always
And
kind of frustrating. But
what was your beast company? Do you remember?
I was I was in first co,
So first go, okay.
yeah, and then I ended up in D1 as a plebe.
D1, there you
So
go.
yeah, yeah,
You know, that
yeah.
side of the Corps
It's
tended
over
to have a
that
little
side.
more sharp edges. How was that
Yeah,
being a plebe?
yeah, some sharp edges, some sharp edges. I remember some names. I just remember some faces that yeah
Yeah.
decided I was a good person to pick on. But it is what it is. That's not a surprise. But once again, plebe year, the academics weren't easy by any means, but that was my strong point.
Yeah, right.
So that helped too, the memorizing and
How did you, in general, cope? How do you remember coping with that pressure and stress we were all under? We all had different mechanisms. What was your approach to handling it?
you know just kind of keep moving forward, I guess. And I remember the one thing I remember, well, lots of things I remember from plebe year. Music, having once we could have our boom boxes. I had this. My dad got me a big boom box, and I just loved that. So that was enjoyable, as silly as that sounds. But just kind of trying to get through that first year. But full disclosure, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. Yearling year was my hardest year.
Really? Talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit.
So plebe year, once again, I could memorize and did okay in academics. Didn't do as well as I would have liked. You all kind of have the shocking reality of you are no longer, number one in your class.
Right.
Somebody was, but it wasn't me. But and the
Absolutely.
cooperate and graduate, and I think all the plebes worked together to, get all our chores accomplished, or whatever the hell we call those duties, get all our duties accomplished and everything else. And then I felt like when we were yearlings, first of all, we changed companies, obviously.
And where did you
Went over
end
to
up as a yearling? Which company?
A4, went
A4.
over to
Okay.
A4.
Yep.
Fourth reg, reputation of being easier, whatever. It didn't really matter when you were a yearling, I guess. But I didn't feel the camaraderie amongst classmates. I think, yearlings were trying to mix with the upper classes a little bit more and not, we didn't have to bond together as a class as much when we were yearlings. I felt a little lost as a yearling, I'll be honest. That was my least favorite year there, in all honesty, better, even more so than plebe year. Interestingly.
Favorite roommates? Who were roommates that you enjoyed rooming with?
Jill Spangler and Terry Arndt. Yeah. Well, then in yearling year also, I had the broken leg problem. So
Uh-oh. What happened?
that made life challenging. That's another reason I hated yearling year. Well, I shouldn't name names, but Doug Prevost broke my leg during close quarters combat final
Oh.
exam. Full leg cast right before Christmas. So that really kind of
Oh.
made yearling year unfun too. So there was lots of things wrong with yearling year.
The West Point is not a kind place for truly broken
Right.
limbs like that. Carrying all those
No.
books that we had. Yeah, that's no good.
Yeah,
On
that
the
was
sixth
another
floor, no
unpleasant.
doubt.
Yeah. Well, I got to take the elevator. So people would obviously take the elevator with me because, well, Chris has to get on the
Well,
elevator.
you needed help. Cooperate and graduate.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So, anyways,
Wow. And
yeah.
how long did it take for that to heal?
I was in a cast of some sort up until June.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I couldn't go to airborne school because of that. So instead, I could go to jungle school.
You
That
went to
made
jungle
sense.
school.
So I trounced around in the jungle
I
with
guess that's
that
better on the
leg.
leg.
I guess. I don't know. I was like, okay, whatever. But yeah, that was interesting. That was interesting. So
That is
yeah,
why. And so, what was jungle school like? Because not a lot of us went to that. Most of us went airborne and all that. What was jungle school like?
exactly. Interestingly enough, as I would say, I'm looking back on it. It was something you didn't get to do otherwise, because I went to airborne school later on, and we'll talk about that. But so it was kind of cool because it wasn't a school that you would normally get to go to once you're out in a unit. So it was interesting, kind of gross, and kind of we were always wet and we were always dirty and we were always covered in mud and other things. And
What did you do other than try to figure out how the elevator worked and all that? What did you do to keep yourself kind of going during yearling year as the gloomies set in? Yeah.
Started taking some classes that were more enjoyable, I think, than what we had to take during plebes. We started to get some electives a little bit. I took Russian. I remember my yearling year, I had taken Russian in high school, so I enjoyed that. I did very well in that. So that was enjoyable to me. But then I wanted to be an engineering major, so I kind of had to shift away from that after yearling
Yeah.
year because I
Yeah.
needed to take all those other fun things that I
What was
took.
the motivation to take Russian in high school? Let's just.
My sister was a Russian teacher. She took Russian in high school also, same high school I went to, obviously, but she's 14 years older, so big difference. So she was a Russian teacher, high school Russian teacher. So yeah, but I was pretty good at it. So that was kind of nice. That was kind of I hate to say easy class. Nothing was easy, I know, but you
Yeah,
know what I
right.
mean. Sir Yearling year that I
Well,
enjoyed.
like some of us, the academy accelerated away from us. It got harder for you. It sounds like it kind of came to you. So,
It did a little bit, kind of like the stuff I like, So yeah,
and so you've
Cal year.
mentioned engineering. Was that your field of study?
That was I majored in civil engineering, so I
Okay.
was one of those silly people that did the ABET accredited major thing. Whenever we had to go declare a major, at some point we had to do that. You had to say, I want to be an ABET accredited major in civil engineering. I picked civil.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of my dad too, so that's another story. But I remember this major. I don't remember his name, so we're not naming names because I don't remember. But I remember him saying to me, looking at me and saying, "Do you think you can handle this, Urbauer? I don't think you can handle it." And I was like, "I won't use the word I want to use. F you."
Wow. Yeah.
And that is how you motivate me. Because the other little story, briefly, when my dad and my mom dropped me off at West Point, the reception day or whatever that
Uh-huh.
was called, I don't know, whatever that day was.
All right.
My dad turned to me and said, "We'll be back to get you before the summer is over." And I was like hell you will.
Really?
Yeah, that's how he motivates. This is
So
how
he had
Daddy
a
and I
keen sense of what motivated you.
Yep. Yep. And I was like, "I would die before he will come get me." So,
What a great
and then
attitude, though. Yeah.
on the sword I gave him at graduation, it said, "Dad, you didn't think I'd make it this far." Well, Kris, so there you go. So, anyways,
And then you wouldn't whack that major with the sword. You didn't think I was
well,
going to get the degree. So you just
I
went
was
around and
like, "All
took
right, buddy." I don't remember his name.
So,
I
so
this
the
major.
accredited civil engineering track, you
Mm-hmm.
picked that.
I did.
And how did you find that?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I did pretty well. And some classes I really enjoyed. I got like an A+ in soil mechanics of all things.
Really?
And then I ended up getting masters in soil mechanics later on. So some things I really liked. I did have I forget exactly what they called it, some sort of self-study civil engineering thing that only a handful of us did. And you had to do an oral exam at the end. And this is another very vivid memory. I did quite well in that class with the one-on-one with the professor, but when I went to do the oral exam, I froze. I'll never forget it. It was horrible.
That's a weird feeling, isn't it?
It was just,
Yeah.
I've never really liked public speaking, and then or now, or I've gotten a little better at it, I guess. I've had to do it a lot, in my civilian life, but yeah, that's another kind of vivid memory. And then I had to do it again just in front of him, and I did fine on a Saturday morning, but yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway,
But
these things we remember.
a big enough event that you remember it, right? It's a
Mm,
reference event. As you went into your Cal year and then first year, how did your life change? Obviously, you could walk more effectively without the
I could
cast,
walk
which
better.
is good. What
Um,
kept you busy?
Cow year, I don't remember a lot about cow year except for studying and engineering courses and design problems and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Was doing intramurals then because, as I mentioned, I wasn't good enough to play collegiate tennis. Um, just kind of going along. I remember when we got our cars in second semester, cow year, even if we
Your
weren't
car
supposed to
made
have
your
them yet.
howitzer
But,
right up, didn't it?
the buying the car and that stuff. And I had the car stored. I forget where the hell I parked it, off post somewhere in the second semester. So that kind of stuff made life a little bit better.
And you
But
drove
yeah, I
a
enjoyed being a first.
Z28. Let's
I
just put it
did.
out on the table.
I did. I loved my Camaro Z28.
Branched engineer. What was your thinking there, and at what point did you know you were going to branch engineers?
Oh, I probably knew I was going to branch engineer before I even went to
Is that
West
right?
Point. So yeah. Just that was my thing. I was going to be an engineer, and I was going to study engineering, and I was going to use my math, and so yeah. So that was kind of there was never any question about that in my mind. So yeah, just wanted to make sure I was high enough in the class to get it because
Yeah,
there wasn't that many spots, but.
because you had to have the grades to be an engineer. And then how about first assignment selection? How did that turn out? Were your grades high enough that you could kind of pick from many options, or did you have just a few?
Well, this is kind of embarrassing, but as a female engineer, the list was 3 or 4 places, maybe.
Yeah.
That was it. Because, there, whatever, everything was limited at the time.
Right.
I could have gone to Germany, but I was afraid to. I'd never been out of the country. I didn't really travel much when I was a kid. I didn't come from a wealthy family that went on, vacations overseas in the summer. And so
Yeah, right.
I was too afraid to go overseas initially. So I chose Fort Riley, Kansas.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It wasn't a bad place to be. Manhattan, Kansas State was there. We were in our 20s, so college town. I know it's Kansas, but still, I enjoyed my time there.
So what was your first assignment? What was the first job you had?
34th Engineer Battalion, B Company. So yeah, vertical construction platoon leader first. That was the plumbers, the masons, the carpenters. We didn't do a lot of that kind of work, but we did renovate a bunch of World War II barracks. That was a big project. I remember when I was a second lieutenant, and we built them outside. We built, training military operations and urban terrain site there at Fort Riley. So those were a couple of things I remember very well. And then I had the horizontal platoon, we're at the big earth moving equipment. That was kind of fun. So that was interesting. And then I was an XO of a Medium Grove Ridge company. So I was the only female in that company, but that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that. I really liked my commander. We didn't build bridge too often, but we did have the snow removal and the salting of Fort Riley because we had all the dump trucks. That was another one of the big assignments I guess we did
critical
while I was
role
there.
At Fort Riley because it gets a little chilly there.
That was kind of fun. Went to the NTC quite a few times, Red Forest and Blue Forest. That was interesting and fun. I enjoyed that. It was just, kind of an experience, obviously. So yeah, I enjoyed Fort Riley. It wasn't a bad place. We went to Honduras also when I was part of the group staff. I was the group assistant S1 or something boring like that. Didn't care for that job, but we went down to Honduras to do some humanitarian building of things, schools and an airfield and that.
How'd you find that?
So
Just because you'd mentioned you hadn't been out of the country a lot, but what was that experience like?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought that was great. I guess I was growing a little bit and, ready to kind of explore more. But obviously it was, we all went down there as a group, but we did, a couple times got to go, I would say go out on the weekend and go to the beach and, try some food alongside of the road and that sort of thing. And that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I enjoyed that. That.
Now you stayed in for 9 years.
I did.
So what did you do after Riley? Because I think you had to go somewhere else, right?
Yeah, well, I went to the advanced course, of course, and then all of the single people after the advanced course went to Korea. So,
Hey,
so there we go.
Congratulations.
I got to go. So another good experience, kind of an interesting experience, not something I would have necessarily chosen per se.
Yeah.
But, it was eye-opening. It was enjoyable. I love the food. Was there for a year, did facilities engineering. So wasn't really in a unit, but I was, responsible for like 13 different installations. So I got to travel around the countryside quite a bit. That was kind of fun. This is kind of a side of the story. I don't know. A lot of people in the class don't know, but ran into a person that I knew at Fort Riley in Korea. So, you're familiar. I've seen you before. Anyways, ended up kind of hanging out with that person. It was a man for the year, and then became my fiance, blah, blah, blah. We don't talk about that too much, but that helped me get through the year in Korea.
Right.
I had someone I knew and hung out with and traveled around the country.
Well, I mean, for someone who initially was reluctant for all the right reasons to not live abroad, going to Korea is going into the deep end. So.
Yes, it was. Yeah. But I survived and my parents survived because I came back and I went to Fort Bragg. Are we allowed to say that? Fort Liberty?
Sure.
Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
It was Fort Bragg at the time.
It was Bragg back at the time.
That's right. So went back to Bragg. Was very excited about going to Bragg. My soon-to-be husband at the time was going to Hawaii, which is one of the reasons. Anyways, so then we both went to Bragg. But I loved Fort Bragg.
Okay.
I loved Fort Bragg. My personal life wasn't pleasant at the time, but I loved Fort Bragg. I was a company commander there. I absolutely loved being a company commander. I had an airborne terrain analysis platoon. They were on airborne status. All of the company wasn't, but so we technically were an airborne company. So we jumped quite a bit. I went to jump master school.
Kris, what does
Um,
an airborne terrain analysis company do? That's fantastic. What is that?
I, yeah, well, jump in and then they analyze the terrain. I mean, I know it's too silly as that sounds, but literally, kind of kind of like engineer scouts, I guess you'd say per se. You know what I
Really?
mean? That sort of thing. Yeah. You know, peacetime army, you know how it goes. We did a lot of field exercises of whatever the heck we were planning to training to fight against, but yeah, we did a lot of jumping in and a lot snooping and pooping around in the woods. But it was fun.
That's
That
super
was
interesting.
fun.
I've never heard of it. So basically, if a large unit is going to move through, the engineer scouts would go in to determine what kind of works had to be done to support the
And
operations.
the
So
other
you were
the
kind
other side of the company, though, too, I guess this is the other tie-in, is the rest of the company printed maps. So
yeah,
we made maps. So the terrain analysts did some of the, terrain analysis. I keep saying it over the same way.
yeah,
I don't know
right.
how
No,
to
I got
describe
you.
it. And then we also printed maps. So we had, they were like big tractor trailer things, with printing presses in them and all the different types of things that you use to kind of literally draw the maps. So that was really cool. So that was a lot of fun. But once again, just being at Fort Bragg and being in an airborne company and getting to jump as much as I wanted to, pretty much. I just love that. And then since I was asking my NCOs who were on airborne status to go to jump master school, I decided I needed to do it. So I was the first female officer in my engineer group to go. So this was a big
Congratulations.
wahoo.
That's great.
Well, it was probably a detriment of my career. But if they were going to go, I should go. So passed the test to get in and went through the
okay.
school. Got through JMPI on the first try, so I passed the school on the first try, which is not normal, to be
Yep.
honest. I don't think, but I think it's because we have smaller hands. We were better at JMPI. Women have smaller hands. We could get underneath stuff and everything else. So anyway, so did well. I was happy. To be honest, the proudest moment in my life, I believe, is graduating Jump Master School on the first try, even more so than getting through West Point,
Good for
because
you,
that
though.
was a
That's
big
great.
deal. But then I went back to my unit that day, and I saw my battalion commander in the motor pool, and he was trying to get through Jump Master School. He had already not made it through the first time, was going to be going back a second time. So, of course, he walks up to me, and he's like, and my name was different at the time, but, Captain Lemons, are you a failure? And I was like, no, sir, I am not a failure. I was like, up yours, buddy.
That head
So,
wag
yes,
didn't
I
help
had
you. I'm guessing, right?
no. So, I've had a few of those
Yeah, that didn't
instances
help.
in life
Yeah,
that haven't helped.
yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess the group commander was all upset that they had let me go and blah, 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 blah. So, whatever. Anyways, but it was fun. And then I
It,
got my senior wings and I
it
got my
created a
senior blood
kerfuffle.
wings and everything else. I created a kerfluffle. But it was fun. Bragg was fun. Really was. After I came out of command, I was on brigade staff, and they had a tasking for a one-person temporary duty assignment to go to basically serve with the United Nations Protection Forces in Sarajevo, and the topographic engineer. So there I was, because I had the topo company. So so I got to go to Bosnia in 1994 during the war.
Okay. Yeah.
It was interesting because there was Americans in Croatia and there was Americans in Kosovo, and of course later than that there was more Americans in Kosovo and everything else, but there really weren't any Americans in country. Sarajevo, Bosnia Herzegovina itself,
Right.
until I showed up.
You were it. You were that.
I was it.
That's what the train analysis group does. They're the first in.
That's right. That's right. And so one very interesting piece of that, this was the most weirdest. Here we go again with the person who didn't want to go live overseas. I literally flew into Stuttgart, met up with my old battalion commander, put me on another plane, sent me to Zagreb. Got to Zagreb, spent some time with the United Nations headquarters folks there, and the engineering portion and topo people and blah blah blah. And then shortly thereafter, they were going to send me down to Sarajevo. So I'm literally standing in this tent, and there's a big white plane out in front of me, and it was a UN, big white UN plane with UN. It was a Russian plane. And I have these two massive bags that literally I couldn't carry because they were bigger than I was. And these two Ukrainians came along and picked up my bags and helped me get them on the plane. And I got on a Russian plane with two Ukrainian officers and a bunch of other odd and assorted nationalities, civilians and military, and took off and flew into Sarajevo. And in my mind, I'm going, what the hell am I doing? It was craziness. It's crazy.
Captain, you're not in Kansas anymore.
No, no. It was very interesting.
And what was your job there, and what did you experience?
So I had a small team of British map makers, also topographic engineer soldiers. There was 3 or 4 of them. They varied because they kind of came and went. Everybody was on a little bit of a different cycle. We had a lot of fun. We actually printed maps. We had a lot of standard USGS product that we passed out to different units in the area, but we also printed maps of the safe routes where you could travel without danger, in country. And then we took those to some of the different outposts throughout, Bosnia itself. It was quite an experience. Wore the blue beret and everything, and they bombed the city every night. And you just kind of lay there and go, okay, here we go.
And it was a very dynamic situation, so you had to keep the maps updated so people could travel safely, given all the
exactly, and where the checkpoints were, and who had what territory, the Serbs, the Croats. While I was there, I had 30 days of UN leave where I could leave the war zone and get away, whatever. So I ran all over Europe. Here we go, the person who didn't want to live overseas. My sister met me in Germany the one time, and we ran around Germany and Austria a little bit, and then I went off on my own once. I went to Vienna and Budapest and Prague. And then one time I got stuck. I couldn't get back into Sarajevo because the airport was closed because they were shelling. So every day I would have to go to the place where the plane took off from, whatever the hell they called that, and check in and see if I could possibly fly that day.
Yeah.
That was out of Frankfurt. That was a really interesting experiences while I was there, but it was pretty cool. Once again, it was a pretty neat thing to get to do. Yeah. So I enjoyed that.
See that? Study your soils, kids, and you get to go do adventurous things.
And make maps. Yeah.
And what was the thinking on getting out?
It was that 95, they were begging us to get out. Mm-hmm. Everybody probably remembers that, depending on what branch you were. And obviously, overstrength, blah, blah, blah. No guarantees you can stay in for 20, blah, blah, blah. So, I'd done my command, and I was like, well, I don't really know what else is in front of you after you have a company command. There's quite a bit of stuff you got to muddle through before you might be a battalion commander, and, so whatever. So anyway, so I didn't think my future was so bright. So sure. I, signed the paperwork and got out and went back to grad school full time. So
I saw that in University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. And then what did you study in grad school?
Civil engineering.
There you go.
I got my master's in soils, so I'm
you're good with soils.
Geotechnical is the appropriate term, I guess. So geotechnical engineering. I got my master's in geotech. I had done my EIT at West Point, so then I sat for my PE while I was in grad school and got my PE there. Just for me, I really never intended to use it. I'll be honest. I didn't necessarily want to be a design person, but
There's a lot of General Electric on your resume. How did that transpire? And talk a little bit about your ongoing adventure.
So, interesting. Like I started to say, I was kind of hiding a little bit in grad school for those 18 months, trying to kind of figure myself out after getting out of the military, which is kind of your existence and who you were and everything. So anyways, did some interviewing on campus, like all the other kids, but they were kids and I wasn't. Got linked up with Orion, one of those early JMO recruiting firms, or whatever the right terminology is there. So interviewed with a lot of companies through them at one of their hiring events they had, and GE latched onto me and gave me some options. They gave me choices. They gave me you could do one of these 3 things. What would you like to do? So decided I would go with them, and then I was a black belt, Six Sigma.
That was the. I don't want to misspeak, but that was a very hot topic then, and it was quite grueling to go through that and talk about becoming a Six Sigma black belt back in the day. Yeah,
back in the day. So that was the thing. Like you said, it was the hot topic, and went to Louisville, Kentucky, worked at GE Appliances as a black belt.
Really?
Had a couple interesting projects. Now, appliances, they're not very exciting, but the one thing I said to myself was, at least you kind of know what they are. You know what I mean? I knew something about appliances. It wasn't like I was going in completely blind. So did mostly worked on washing machines, but did a couple projects on washing machines, found some things that were wrong with the manufacturing process to save GE
Yeah,
some
but
money.
that's your point. You weren't actually working on
Exactly.
washing machines. You're working on an entire process that was creating a lot of things,
Exactly.
right? So, yeah, yeah.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So kind of got noticed by one of the female officers in the company, and she took me under her wing, and which was very much a positive, obviously. And then I became a master black belt, and I taught Six Sigma for a while. That was pretty cool. Um, Absolutely not my comfort zone again of being up on stage and teaching, but that was probably my first foray into teaching out. So that was fun. I enjoyed that. I actually enjoyed teaching Six Sigma.
You
Enjoyed.
spent quite a few years in Louisville then, if you've moved to Chicago
Did
from there, obviously. So,
I did. So just hung out in Louisville for quite a while doing the master black belt thing. Had a team working for me for a while, and we were working on dishwashers and other
right.
fun things. Then when I wanted to move home, was my mom was ill, and I was kind of at that point where I could be changing jobs if I kind of thought it was time and wanted to. So my mentor at the time helped me, get the job up here. So then I was a region manager for consumer service. So
Mhm.
those appliance technicians that come into your house, I had like a 9-state area. Um, Here we go again. I was the only girl, and they never had a female in leadership in that part of the business. Blah 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 blah. So here
Yeah.
we go again. There I was. Didn't know a lot about the service business per se, but obviously knew the product. So whatever. That could be challenging at times, mostly with not being accepted per se, at least early on.
Yeah, right.
Um, but got to travel around my area a lot for that. The kind of the quote unquote highlight of that, and it leads to something else. I had a union campaign in my region.
Okay.
Um, and of course, GE would never say they're anti-union, but we prefer to operate in a non-union environment. So
And you went to all
um,
sorts of trainings to learn how to say that well, I imagine, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was not a good thing to have folks that wanted to join the union. Of course, this was all brewing before I became
Sure.
the region manager, and then the person that was in charge of that part of the region, which was Michigan, was moved into another job right before I came in. So I'm trying to hire somebody to go in there, and we got these folks that run. So it was just a mess. It was a bit of a mess, but dealt with that for about 6 months and spent a lot of time there. But in that activity, I will say I met my next mentor within GE that really kind of took me under their wing.
Okay.
And he was the personnel relations leader for all of GE, which really meant he went out and fought these union campaigns. So he was the person that was with you when you had a problem to
Right.
try to figure out what the heck was wrong and what could we do to make it better, and talk to the employees and figure out what's making them upset, and all of that positive, we call it positive employee relations, but when it went wrong, obviously, we had to have
Yeah, right.
a corporate help. Um, so I spent a lot of time with this gentleman, of course, learning the trade. And then just so happened that after a year in this region manager role, that particular part of the business decided to reorganize, which was a common thing at GE.
That is
So they
very
took out
common.
my layer.
Yeah.
We just, we don't need these region managers anymore. So, so anyway, so that was the end of that. So I was here in Chicago, so I ended up working for GE Capital Rail Services. And I was actually a rail car sourcing manager. So I
Really?
bought rail cars. They thought that engineering and all that good stuff, and I had to go to the manufacturers and I had to inspect them. And I hated that job. I just despised it. I'll admit it. I didn't care for the people I worked with. I didn't like what I was.
And
I'm
you
just
don't
being
like
honest.
railroads.
No, I was like, oh gosh. So anyway, so that was a little bit of misery, but I was here in Chicago, and that was, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Taking care of mom
So
and taking care of business, right?
it is what it is. But that only lasted, about 6 months, because then 9/11 happened.
Right.
And I and like all of us, wanted to do something. So I signed a piece of paper volunteering to go somewhere if they needed me to go. And so I got called up. I called back to active duty
Who did you
after
sign that
9/11.
paperwork? That's very interesting. I think a bunch of us were looking around for some way to help, but you signed something. Who
I
was that
don't
with?
even know how I found it. There was some DD form, whatever.
Huh.
I honestly, I don't really remember how I would have even discovered this. I really don't. But I do. I remember obviously signing something. Um, not thinking it would even necessarily go anywhere. But
Yeah,
then
right.
I got the call. I literally got the call from the Pentagon. I guess it was about probably 2 weeks after the actual obviously event, and I got assigned to the New York City Engineer District.
Hmm.
So U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New York District. The commander of the New York District was my S3 when I was at Fort Bragg.
There
So
you
I
go.
think he saw my name on a list and said,
That's
"I know that
probably what
one.
happened.
I'll take
That
that
one.
one."
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so I got to go to New York City. I got there October 1st, and I was there for a year. So the Corps of Engineers was responsible for supervising the cleanup activities of all the contractors that were hired to clean up
Yeah.
the mess. So spent a lot of time, at the site in the hole, checking on the civilian Corps of Engineer employees. I gave a lot of tours. That was kind of icky sounding, but any military bigwig, foreign nationals,
Were you
bigwigs.
back in uniform?
I was. I was
Really?
back on active
And what was
duty.
your
I was in
rank?
uniform.
Captain again?
Well, there's the funny part. I got promoted to major while I was in grad school
Look at that.
in the reserves, obviously, because I was off active duty. But I kind of took the piece of paper and hung it on the side. I literally hung it on the side of my refrigerator. Never thought anything of it. But then when I got caught, I had all the wrong rank on my new uniforms. I had no major stuff. I was like, so I had to find major stuff, and I was borrowing major stuff, and once I got there, I could go to clothing sales and buy major stuff. But
Right.
so I was a major Urbauer.
Okay, look at that. Yeah.
So
For a
spent the year there,
year.
just
And then
fell in
when
love.
that year ended, how did that end? They just said thank you very much and off you went?
Pretty much, it
That's
was
so interesting.
it was weird. So yeah, I lived in Manhattan, and I went to work at the 26 Federal Plaza when I wasn't actually on the at the Ground Zero site, and ran around New York City on the weekends. And I was a little bit afraid of the city when we were cadets, being honest, because I was from Chicago, but still New York was, bigger and whatever. So, really got to know the city. And to this day, I love the city. I go at least once a year because I just love New York City. Anyways, but yeah, then once it was over, it was like, go back to GE.
Well, the New York of when you were there is very different than the New York of 1982.
Definitely,
So
definitely,
as we all
definitely, definitely,
transitioned through there.
definitely, definitely.
And then you ended
Yeah. So
up back, you retired. Now, I know you had a stint as a veterans hiring person because when you and I ran into each other at one of the reunions and chatted, that was what you were doing. You were
yes,
helping source
yes.
veterans for GE.
Well, I went into the personal relations team when I came back to GE. So then I was in that team with my mentor that I spent all that time with, doing the positive
Right.
employee relations training, and but spent a lot of time talking to employees, touring facilities and talking to employees, trying to find out what makes them tick, what they might be upset about, what they might not be upset about, obviously what they like, what they didn't like.
Yeah.
So that's the job I came back to. So
Okay.
really love that, but I traveled all the time.
Yeah, that's good. And that can get tiring. People
All
think
the time.
it's really
Yeah.
fun to
Yeah.
travel all the time because I did that for my work and it can get tiring.
So I did that for about 8 years.
Yeah, look at you.
And then when I was like, I'm kind of tired. I'm tired. And then literally, like, my 1/1 was the HR person for all of GE. So he's like, Kris, what would you like to do?
Yeah, yeah.
And I had been co-leading the Veterans Network at that point in time, our affinity group,
Sure.
which was relatively new. So I was, chosen to be one of the co-leaders of that when we launched it. So that was a part-time gig. But they all kind of saw, like, she really likes this veteran stuff. So I ran all the veteran programs for GE. That was kind of my dream job that they created for me. I got the budget. I got to still continue to run the affinity group, figure out where GE wanted to get involved with other volunteer support or veteran support organization. I'm sorry. So that was my dream job. That was the best job I had while I was at GE.
And that's when you retired from.
That is the one I retired from.
Good for you.
Retired from GE from.
So
Yes.
retiring from your dream job, I mean, that's primo. That's way to go.
Yeah.
And that's
So it was a lot
rather
of
than
fun.
getting, the job that you hate and you just retire out of frustration. That's a lot less fun to talk about over scones. What advice would you give yourself of many years ago? Well, you pick a period, but what advice would you give a young Kris Urbauer as she was going through this adventure?
What advice would I give to myself? I would say just be open to new opportunities and new things, because I think I wouldn't say I passed on things early on, but like the whole not going to Germany, stuff like that. Be a little bit, give yourself more grace. I've tried to get better about that. Because, we all need to give ourselves more grace. I think we give grace to others more so than we'll give it to ourselves. I've always been, it's the personality type that goes to West Point. You're always going to kind of hard on ourselves, I think, personally. That's what I see in other folks too. But that's kind of the big thing. And, if you really want to do something, just do it. And if you don't want to do something, say no.
Wise
Sometimes
words.
you can, sometimes you can't, but yeah. So,
when you hear this wisdom when you're young, you think, well, that's just trite nonsense. But when you hear it at our age, you're like, wise words, and very hard to do. Kris, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
It's really been a pleasure being here. Thank you for doing this, Paul. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and to stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe buttons. With 954 living graduates in the class, we have a lot of stories to collect, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.